Right, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is the third class of the art of Dawah. And today we will discuss a couple of principles, the principle of wisdom and the principle of wishing good for everyone. So let's start with the first principle, wisdom. We'll discuss a few things about it first. That's not specifically related to Dawah, but to understand what wisdom really is, and also some aspects of wisdom in the revelation, as well as examples from the seerah and how we can apply that in our Dawah. So the word wisdom, it's a little challenging to really give a really conclusive definition. It's a mix of many things. It's a mix of knowledge, experience, lots of understanding, reflection, using all the information that you deal with on a daily basis and having a high-level overview over it. It's considered to be the midway between instinct, which comes naturally. You still don't have lots of knowledge, you have no experience, and so on, and stupidity, which is the other end. You have all of these elements, but you're not making good use of them. If you make good use of them, it becomes wisdom, which is again crafted through time. And also it's different than intellect. Many times people confuse the two terms. But intellect is something that it's more of a trait. It's something that you are born with. Maybe a person is just smarter than the other person, but it doesn't mean that they are making good use of that. Maybe another person is less smart. He's less capable of doing things, but he has the wisdom to make up for that, and he's making good decisions. We can see that clearly in our lives. You see many people who are very smart. Maybe academically they are doing very well, but when you look at their lives, things are going just downhill. But people who are wise, people who are using this knowledge in a beneficial way and making sure that instead of remembering an event and regretting about it and getting stuck in it, no, instead they look for the best of it. They don't try to make their lives worse. Instead, they just focus on improving and using that feedback to further improve and refine their methods and look at life. And this wisdom, we also see it in the revelation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Hakim, he is the wise. And among these things is also always for the da'i to think about his da'wah, to be taking a gradual approach. Not everyone is on the same page. Not everyone has the same knowledge as the person giving da'wah. We can even see that when the revelation itself was being revealed before the Quran was complete. For example, with the prayer, now we know exactly how many rak'ah per prayer we have. But back then, it was much less. It was only 2 units for every prayer except for Maghrib. And that was some years before Hijrah. Now, after Hijrah, that changed. Dhuhr, Asr, and Isha became 4 units, just because people need to get adapted to it. There's even some, I'm not sure if it's a narration or not, but I read somewhere that even before that, it was just 2 rak'ah in the morning and 2 units of prayer in the evening. So again, it took a gradual approach because it was a big change to these people. Of course, we're not saying that if a person becomes a new Muslim, we tell him to pray only in the morning or in the evening or pray less rak'at. No, this revelation is finalized. There's no change to it. But for the people that it was being revealed to, because these were the people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to accompany his messenger. These were the people who had to implement the deen as best as they can, because they are the ones who would copy it over and preserve it for the upcoming generations. Same thing for zakah. It was made obligatory very early, but there's no specific rate specified. Later, in the 2nd year of Hijrah, that percentage was revealed, which is typically known as 2.5% for money and other commodities. Now, in the 9th year of Al-Hijrah, the Prophet ﷺ would send collectors to people who had farms, who had businesses, to collect that money from them. Before that, they were entrusted with paying it. Again, we see that same thing in fasting as well. When it was first revealed, it wasn't even Ramadan. It was only the day of Ashura. Maybe it was Dawah as well. And it was the month of Ramadan. I'm not sure if it was the month of Ramadan. But anyway, fasting at first, it was a choice. between whether you fast or you feed the poor. Just because people, again, it was new to them. Afterwards, it became obligatory. If you can't fast, you fast, otherwise you feed the poor. And this is a graduation in the revelation, because if a person becomes a Muslim today and he needs to do everything and he literally doesn't even know about them, it doesn't make sense. How can he handle that? By the time he learns a specific act of worship, for example, he needs to implement it right away. It's hard. Instead, as long as he learns and he keeps improving, he starts applying these things. So again, this is wisdom in Dawah, that we need to be merciful with people. We don't overwhelm them. If they are learning, if we see good from them, then we should be happy with that. We shouldn't always be nitpicking. Another thing now in Dawah. So like I said, wisdom is putting things in their appropriate places. For example, if the situation requires you to be kind, you should be kind. If it requires you to be firm, you should be firm. When these things are swapped and there's a situation that's not really requiring a strong emotional reaction, and you become very angry, now that person will not appreciate you telling him that, because to him, he knows it's not such a huge, well, it's not something that he should be scolded about. For example, a person walks into the mosque and he doesn't pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid. Now, and this happens many times in many places. If it's something that's very well known, a person will see him sitting and he would scold him. Oh, you shouldn't do that. You should pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid. Instead, I mean, that person could have forgotten. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe if you just told him in a very passive way, it would have gone along, it would have acted very differently in his heart. So if you tell him, for example, I think you forgot to pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid. Now you're not even putting pressure on him to admit, did he forget it, or did he leave it out intentionally? Or if he thought, it's a sunnah, I shouldn't really do it. And even if he didn't do it, it's a sunnah, it's not really sinful for doing that. So let that alone on the side. And also we need to differentiate between a person who is stubborn and a person who is ignorant. Now, the ignorant person, he simply doesn't have anything to defend his understanding with. He just doesn't know. But the person who is stubborn, whether it's he knows that he's supposed to do something that's compulsory and he doesn't, or he doesn't even want to know, that's another problem. And this person may require a different technique. Again, doesn't mean that you go straight into scolding and being harsh and rough, but take a gradual approach, jump between the different techniques. At the end, you only want is to do the dawah, give the dawah, deliver the message. The person accepts, that's good. He doesn't, you did your part. Now we see many examples of this in the dawah, and the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Now I want to read the hadith. I think most people already know it. It's the hadith of there's a Bedouin that came to the masjid, and the Prophet ﷺ, he was sitting with his companions. Now that Bedouin, since he is among the people who, like, Bedouin means a person who is coming from al-Badia. Al-Badia is the piece of land where people, take care of sheep. They live in the desert. So they are generally more rougher. They are generally lacking certain social skills and etiquettes. They are less educated. So again, that person, that Bedouin, when he came in, he peed in the mosque. And when the Sahaba saw that he was urinating, they got very angry. Because of course, the masjid is a place that's supposed to be always clean. And when you do that, now it becomes impure. And back then, it wasn't like we have it today. It didn't have like mats and rugs and all of that. Instead, it was just basically sand, and maybe there was something on top, a piece of cloth or something for people to pray on. So again, it was much easier to clean. Anyway, when the Prophet ﷺ saw that and saw his Sahaba getting angry, he told them to be patient and to let him finish. And afterwards, he explained to him that this is the place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being worshipped. Any kind of urine or filth is not suitable for this masajid. Instead, this masajid are only appropriate for the remembrance of Allah, for prayer, and for recitation of the Quran. Now he explained that to him very gently. The reason for that is there are many things. First of all, that person, the Bedouin, he did that definitely unintentionally. He didn't realize that this was problematic to him. He's just ignorant. The other thing is there's also bigger harm if they were to stop him on spot. First, when they cut the flow of urine, it's very harmful for that person. It may cause more damage, whether it's to his clothes, whether his private parts get exposed, whether it covers more area. And at the end, the solution is simple, alhamdulillah. It's just by pouring water. When there's urine or there's dirt on the earth, a single pouring of water is enough. So the wiser solution here was not to cut him midway, but instead to wait till he finishes and then educate him, and you manage the harm that was left. Another example from this here is when the Prophet ﷺ was leading the Sahaba, and the people behind him, there was, back then in the revelation, the prayer, you were allowed to talk during it. Even when you're doing sujood or ruku', you were allowed to talk. And when new revelation came in, and the Sahaba knew that they were not allowed to do that, one of the people came and he didn't realize. He's called Muawiyah ibn al-Hakam as-Sulami. So he didn't know, and then he was, I think he was sneezing. Yeah, a person sneezed. So he told him, Yarhamukumullah. Now he could see the people gazing at him, that they were very unhappy about what he's doing, but he didn't realize what was going on. So he asked him, what is the matter? Why are you looking at me? And then they started to make a gesture by striking their hands on their legs, so he may just stop what he's doing. So anyway, the prayer finished, and the Prophet ﷺ explained to him in the most gentle way that this is no longer allowed. He said, verily, anything from the speech of people is not appropriate for this prayer. Rather, it's the prayer, rather it is only tasbih, takbir, by saying Allahu Akbar, and recitation of the Quran. He wasn't angry at him, he didn't frown at him, he didn't strike him. And there's also a juristic benefit here, that if you talk during prayer out of ignorance because you don't know, or because you forgot, your prayer is still valid. Now, if a person asks you and they don't see you praying, they ask, oh, where is the remote control or something? And you answer, and you know that you're in prayer, and then you continue, that's not out of forgetfulness. You're just ignoring that you're in a state of prayer, and then you have to start over. But if you do it out of ignorance because you don't know, or out of forgetfulness because you didn't realize that you're not supposed to do that, even if you know, just a mistake, it doesn't invalidate your prayer. But the main lesson here is when you see someone doing something wrong, very clearly, even if that person, even if you think that this is something that's considered common knowledge, take a moment to think, this person, he's very likely not doing it intentionally. He just doesn't know, or maybe he forgot. So always look for excuses for your brother. One final example is that the Prophet ﷺ, when he was walking in Medina, he saw a man wearing a gold ring. Now, in this story, he acted very differently. It was not the usual kind approach. Instead, what he did, he removed it and he threw it, and he said, does one of you betake himself to an ember of fire and then place it on his hand? Now, the reason why his response was so firm is that there is a good chance that this prohibition was known, that the Prophet ﷺ told people already that you're not allowed to wear gold, and that person knew. Instead, he ignored that. He ignored that command. He just, ignored it and kept wearing that golden ring. So when that ring was still on the ground, a person told him, just take your ring. You can sell it, you can give it to your wife, whatever. But instead he said, no, by Allah, I will never take it, after the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, had thrown it down. Now, this is very important for us because many times we will see people doing great evils in front of us. And the approach is not always to be very gentle. If a person is doing something that's very known in Islam, and you have reasonable confidence that this person is doing something and he knows that it's wrong, you shouldn't go and be smiling and giving him a very easy time. Many times when you see a munkar taking place in front of you, you should be much more firm. You need to make him feel that this is not fine. This is not the usual kind and friendly conversation. Again, it depends on it depends on many elements. If you can't really do that, or if there's danger in you doing that, again, you try the best you can. And fear Allah as much as you can. And if that, if prohibiting evil may cause bigger evil, it's better to leave it alone. For example, the story of Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. He was walking with some of his companions, and he saw the Tatar, the people who the Mongols. He saw some of them sitting under a bridge, I believe, and they were drinking alcohol. Now, his friends, his companions, they asked him, why are you not prohibiting them from doing that? Because he was very well known for commanding good and prohibiting evil. He didn't fear others. He would do that with any person, no matter how great or beloved he is by his people, or how many are there to protect him and get angry for him. So he told his companions, if I do that, if I prevent them, if I tell them to stop drinking alcohol, they will start harassing people. That's because they already knew how the Mongols dealt with Muslims, even though some of them considered themselves to be Muslims, but that's a different topic. So the point is, if there's a greater harm in what you're going to be commanding or prohibiting, you need to take a step back. It's better to let the smaller harm take place than the bigger harm. A person drinking alcohol, he's primarily harming himself, not others. Of course, in a secondary way, he's harming others, but primarily it's affecting him. Now, if you would stop them after they are drunk, or even if they're not drunk, if they are known to be troublemakers, what's going to happen now? Now they are not drinking alcohol, but they are harassing Muslims and hurting them. And if they can, they may even kill them. Would that be a better approach? No. So in that case, we pause and we just let them do that sin. We still don't accept it. We don't accept it by any means. But it's a matter of, do we want small evil? Is it better to have small evil taking place or bigger evil taking place? And again, this is part of wisdom. This is part of asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us wisdom, to give us basira, to give us understanding, because these situations, we always need to reflect upon them. We don't want to act recklessly or act based on emotions and not think about the longer term. A person may, make a mistake, but they will learn from it. And again, that's part of wisdom. That's the part that always comes back. The feedback you receive from what you did should always be fed back into your thought process. Let's take a break for a minute, inshallah. Then we move on with the fourth principle. Right, the fourth principle is the principle of wishing good and loving your brothers. Now, the first part is going to be about the brotherhood between Muslims. And this is really specific to how Muslims connect with each other. The second part is going to be more general. It includes Muslims and non-Muslims as well. So brotherhood between Muslims. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. The believers are nothing but brothers. Now, this is very important for anyone who is involved in da'wah, and even if you're not involved in da'wah, even if you're dealing with people in general, you always want to make sure that when you are dealing with your brothers, that you are in the mindset that these people are on your side. You don't want to cause any transgression against them. You don't want to break any bonds between your brothers. You don't want to even see two brothers having a disagreement and you just say, oh, this is not my problem. I'm not going to try to, reconnect them. Instead, let them be. I don't care. And the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يحل لمسلم أن يهجر أخاه فوق ثلاث. It's unlawful for a Muslim to desert or to stop talking to his brother beyond 3 nights. In that way, they would meet and they would one would turn one way and the other turn to the other way, and they don't even greet. Instead, the better of the two is the one who starts greeting the other first. Now, this is how we're dealing generally with each other. We want to always maintain those bonds. This is how, as a Muslim nation, we become stronger. If a person starts to call his brother names, especially names that have a legal evidence supporting them, like fisq, like a fasiq, like a mubtadi', like kafir, mushrik, all of these names, these are much, much more dangerous because these cut the tie between you and your brother. Now you're even saying that he should be abandoned, he should be boycotted, and we should be very, very careful on how we deal with these issues. Now, regarding everyone, whether it's a Muslim or a non-Muslim, we want to wish good for them. So if a person is a believer, we hope for him to become a better believer. We can't see him doing something good, and we become jealous in a way that prevents us from, we can hope that we become like him or better. That's fine, that's permissible in matters of religion. But when you see him doing something good, and instead you wish that he would not be doing that good, that's a very bad act to do. Because now that jealousy, which the lesser state of it is called ghubta in Arabic, which is hoping to be good like him. But when you're hoping that that virtue he's doing is gone from him, that's very sinful, that's very disliked. It's unreasonable for a believer to hope that his brother becomes a worse person. We also hope for the sinner to stop sinning. If we see him doing a sin, we don't just give up on him. At the very least, we can make dua for him. If we can't directly tell him, or if he's not listening, at the very least, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide him and to make him stop committing that sin. And finally, we hope for a disbeliever to become a Muslim. Many brothers at Dawah, sometimes they would forget that we are merciful with these people. We hope good for them. We hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides them to Islam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to turn their hearts from shirk and for them to become good brothers to us. And if the mindset is to just leave them as they are, how can we have the energy to even try with them and tell them the message of Islam and the message of Tawheed? It's just unreasonable. And there's a great story about that in Sirah. When the Prophet ﷺ, he kept giving da'wah for many, many years to Mecca. And he was not successful to a large degree because many of them simply just stopped listening to him and meeting with him, and that's it for them. So he went searching for another land to give them the message of Tawheed. So he went to Al-Ta'if. He went walking. So he would spread that message. And when he went there, he talked to 3 brothers who acted as leaders for Al-Ta'if. Yet they were very harsh. They started mocking him. They started making fun of him. They started threatening him. So he left them and he started giving da'wah to the other noble people for 10 days. And the reason why he targeted those nobles is it's very likely for a person to follow his lord or his commander or his superior. So if that person of the high rank becomes a Muslim, the chances of the people who follow him are much higher. But these people, instead, they made slaves and kids go after him. They started throwing rocks at him till he bled, till his head started bleeding. And he left. He was very sad. He was very drained because his people rejected him, and those people were the people he went to in Taif were much harsher as well. And on his way back to Mecca, Jibril alayhi salam and the angel responsible for the mountains, they came to him and they told him, if you want, we will make those two mountains fall on them. إن شئت أن أطبق عليهم الأخشبين. إن شئت أن أطبق عليهم الأخشبين. الأخشبين are the two mountains that are around the Taif. So if you wished, I would make those two mountains fall on them. Instead, the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't just want to achieve personal gratification. Instead, he said, بل أرجو أن يخرج الله من أصلابهم من يعبد الله وحده لا يشرك به شيئا. Instead, he said, no. Instead, I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may have their offspring become Muslims, people who only worship Allah without any partners. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted the dua, and after the Fath of Mecca, although they were still very resistant, they did become Muslims. And that incident was so severe to the point that Aisha radiallahu anha, when she asked him, was there a rougher event than Uhud? The Battle of Uhud was a very rough battle on Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, it's when I went to give da'wah to Taif. So the point here is that during da'wah, we want the driving force for us to be pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to spread the message of Tawheed, to do our part and to hope good for people. Even if they are non-Muslims, even if they are doing many great sins, we still hope good for them. Because if we think that it's not worth it, or it's not going to work, or there's no point, our da'wah will be very weak. It won't be sincere. It won't be fed by the proper emotions. The Prophet ﷺ did that because even if he didn't see an immediate response, he had a long-term vision, and he was patient in that. So instead, we should be patient. We should hope good for them. Even if they are not listening, we can always back it up by dua. This is it, inshallah, for this class. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.